Today's question is, Reddit, what is the saddest feeling in the world?
But before we begin, it would help us a lot if you subscribed, since 97.5% of the people who watch our videos are not subscribed. So without further ado, let's start. I picked my dad up from the airport after not seeing him for 2 months. I was so tired on the drive home that I did not converse much. We stopped and had McDonald's around midnight. The following morning, he had a stroke and eventually passed. 3 years later, my mom is on life support due to a disease that took over her lungs. She was on life support with a machine breathing for her. She was coherent and was able to hear me and respond to my questions by squeezing my hand. The doctor told me that I needed to make a decision on keeping her on life support, something I was not prepared for nor could do. She was my fucking best friend, for crying out loud. I wanted what my mom wanted. So I started to ask her if she knew where she was, and she squeezed my hand, letting me know she knew. I then asked her if she knew she was on life support, which she responded she did. Finally, I asked her if she wanted to go be with Dad or stay with me and my sister, and I'll never forget how hard she squeezed my hand, signifying her desire to be with my dad. This was the single most heart-wrenching moment of my life. I will never forget it. I get tears and feel weak as I type this. Though it does feel good to let it out, I have only mentioned this once before today, and it was on a thread on Reddit. The worst pain in my life was from the day I interrupted my husband's suicide attempt this past August. Opening the guest room door to find his army uniform laid out on the bed next to a big bottle of pills and booze sent me into silent shock. I didn't cry out, freak out, but it was almost like an icy cold blade in my stomach. I couldn't react and knew I needed to find him. Seeing his face as he came up the stairs with his army boots, the only piece missing from what he had laid out, seeing his true despair and his realization that I knew what he was going to made it almost too hard to bear. He dropped the boots and ran. That night, after admitting him to the VA, I cried in the bathroom of the VA, wailing in human sounds of grief that came, unwanted, from deep inside. I had held myself together to get him safe, but when all was over, it flooded over me. I felt as if I had already lost everything. I felt helpless. I felt responsible. I could have lost my beloved. He was hurting that bad and I almost couldn't help him. That's a pain I wish on no one. I still see his uniform laid out whenever I see the guest bed. 6 months ago, my 21-year-old brother shot himself in the head. I will never forget the phone call my mom got saying there was an accident and we needed to get there as soon as possible. The screams that came from my mother when she got the call were unreal, unlike any movie character scream ever. She threw the phone and was just screaming over and over. We had left the night before to go to a friend's birthday party, 2 hours, and a ferry ride from home. When we left, my brother was having some friends over to drink and hang out. Now he was dying. We called the ferry and explained the situation since the line to the boat was tremendously long. It would take hours just to get our turn in line. But the ferry people let us move first in line for the next boat. It still felt like it took forever to get home. On the ferry, my dad and I stepped out and just held my weeping mother. We cried together, holding onto one another for support, people staring oddly at us from their vehicles parked on the ferry. The closer we got to the hospital, the more my mom began to lose it. She started hitting a denial phase. We should bring him some clean clothes. He probably got his other ones so dirty. And he wants to get a new tattoo. Let's take him to get it when he gets out of the hospital. And finally, we should get him some good food. He's probably starving. It was so depressing to listen to this and watch my dad nod somberly in agreement while my mom fell apart mentally. He never got out of the hospital. He never woke up. He never spoke another word. We sat by his bedside, my mother, my father, my fiancé, my aunt, while dozens of people came to say goodbye. His girlfriend, co-workers, friends, family, my friends who knew him, everyone. I watched grown men weep while looking down at what was once my handsome, healthy brother, now a shell of the man I knew, covered in blood, eyes black and swollen shut, dried blood crusting on his heads and face and chest. I watched my mom ask for wipes to clean him up. She quietly wiped all the dried blood off of him while she wept into his chest. The machines created a facade of false hope. The beeping and watching the numbers stay at a living person's level. When we rubbed his chest, the numbers would rise. We thought it was him, but it was what we were doing. Not him. His body was reacting to our touch. That was it. From the moment we got there, we knew he wouldn't make it. We knew he was gone. He failed almost every neurotest other than that the neurologist said the very bottom of his brainstem was working to control reflexes, but that was it. His pupils didn't move, his feet didn't pull away when they poked him. Nothing. The next morning after we all slept in the hospital with him, the neurologist came in for one final neurocheck. He failed all of them this time. My mom sat a foot away, her hand on his leg. We had been telling him he could let go for hours, and now it seemed he had. The final test was to turn the machines off and see if he would breathe or do anything on his own. This was by far the saddest moment in my life. I stood behind my mom holding her shoulders, my dad holding her hands. My fiancé sitting with my aunt stood behind me and held me as we prepared for the first real realization of my brother's passing. They turned off the machines. His chest did not move. It did not rise. It became eerily still and silent in the room. We all began to weep and sob into one another as we begged and pleaded for him to wake up one more time. They turned the machines back on because his organs needed to be kept alive, as the doctor pulled my parents aside to discuss what to do with him. Since he was an organ donor, we left an hour later, the machines making his chest rise and fall, but merely with smoke and mirrors. We held my mother up as we walked down the halls together. She collapsed a few times into uncontrollable sobbing onto the floor, and we would pick her up and continue walking out, heads hung low. Leaving the hospital with the machines beeping foully, seeing his chest rising and falling, nearly killed us. Even though we knew he was gone, we got his ashes a week later. Everything that has happened in the last 6 months has been horrible. Watching my mom fall apart and try to stay put together, I have just never seen or felt such sadness. We are still absolutely broken, but I visit my mom every day and tell her how much I love her and hold her while she cries. Seeing and hearing her sob and weep for him is the saddest feeling ever. Knowing I can't bring him back or change what happened or make her feel better, it just kills me. Also, when my 4-year-old son sees Grandma crying and asks her why, and she says she misses Uncle John, his reply is heartbreaking. He just has to fix his head and then he can come home again and we can play with my toys and play video games. He sometimes talks about it. My uncle's John shot himself in the head and went up into heaven to be an angel with all the birdies up in the sky. I feel bad because it is my fault. He says the part about shooting himself in the head because on the way to the hospital I was calling my fiancé and friends to alert them to this and was in shock, saying he shot himself over and over, while my little sponge sat a foot away from me. It's just hard to believe that 3 weeks before that, we sat near each other watching Frozen, singing the songs together, laughing and drinking Slurpees. I will try to write this. Knowing your child has something wrong with them before they are born. Being told your wife should have an abortion. When your child is born, they are flown by helicopter to San Francisco Children's Hospital. Watching your newborn have multiple surgeries. Driving 4 hours each weekend to see your wife who is living in a Ronald McDonald house. They help tons. Watching your child prosper for a couple of months only to go back downward. Being told there is nothing more to do and you only have a month or so left. Taking your child home knowing there is nothing you can do but still hoping. Flying across the country to seek other solutions but being told no. Feeling guilty that you should be doing more and not knowing what to do. Having hospice come to drug your child so they are not in pain. holding your son of 6 months and watching him take his last breath, having to call the mortuary and watching them take him away, not knowing what to do now, feeling helpless. It has been 14 years, and I think about what he would be like today. He was a trooper and stronger than I will ever be. It was good to get this out a bit. And this is the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and don't forget to comment an anecdote or experience similar to the topic of the video. Leave your like, share if you like the video, and lastly, don't forget to activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Bye-bye.